Welcome to Bllaisin History, where we are blazing through history 1 week at a time. Facebook.com/Bllaisin Shows. That's Blaisin Shows. On Twitter @Bllaisin Shows. And my brand new website, go check it out, BllaisinShows.com. Hope you've had a great week and that all is well. And joining me as we're going to talk about January 20th, which every 4 years is a big day in our nation's history because a president gets inaugurated. In this case, it'll be Joe Biden being inaugurated as the 46th president on January 20th. And Dan and I are going to talk, Dan Plaat and I, he's a history minor at the University of New York, also very involved in political organizing and all that good stuff. So there's a lot of really cool tie-ins, and Dan and I are going to start exploring those right now here. Dan, thank you very much for giving me a few minutes here on Bllaisin History.
Oh, my pleasure.
I appreciate you jumping on. Dan also hosts a show via the Pacifica Radio Network and wherever you get your podcasts. It's called The Three Lefts Show, which pretty
I could explain it.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it does take a second. So it's a 2-hour political talk show where we do news and analysis of topics and alternatives from a radical left perspective. The three lefts stand for socialism, anarchism, and ecology, making those words a little less scary, putting a little more depth to them, and also mostly just focusing on the alternatives, the things that are real as well. So we flip-flop between theory, practice, projects that people are actually doing, building mini socialism, just as, economic transition and long game, playing the long game, as it were. Some shows just interview activists, so it's short-term stuff. Some talk strategy and a midterm. This is more long-term, but looking at all the little pieces, trying to bring them together, try to stitch a whole.
Very cool. Well, certainly there are a lot of stuff here, there is a lot of stuff that we can do in terms of tie-ins from a historical perspective. Dan, what's the first presidential inauguration memory that you have?
I suppose it would need to be... See, sometimes it's created, right? I felt I had a memory of 2000, but it was actually the clips from Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 or something.
Yeah.
So I suppose it would have to be Obama, but it's not like I watch it like the Thanksgiving Day parade. You say it's a very important in history, but it's just the kind of officiating of the office. And of course, I'm the side of I prefer we not have a president at all, or we at least split up the power of the president.
Mm-hmm.
Americans seem to flip-flop between wanting the president to have supreme authority, so it's one person you can blame. And this is certainly, from the system's point of view, a very nice function of having a big executive office, is that it's one person. If they're mad about anything, they can just be mad at this one person. Versus if it's split up, and then it's more complicated, but it also means if things are going wrong, it means there's a lot of people to cast aspersions on or support and say it's, as the Trump base would say, it's like when something good happened, it was all Trump.
Right.
Or the president, whoever that is.
It's like the manager in baseball. It's like the head coach of a team. We all kind of like to have this one person to throw the shade.
Yes, or look at when there's a success. Yeah, but really, all social action is a community effort or a team effort. Maybe there's someone who's doing a little more, or you can they have more quality of some kind, but otherwise, maybe they're more charismatic, and that's what sticks out. I've one of my gripes with the system overall is that rewards charisma over other intelligences.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not. When I read a stat once upon a time of when people are hired, they're more likely to be hired if they're taller for executive positions. Yeah, and that's why I'm well, this is all bull crap, because if it's just a matter of height sometimes, then how does anything else matter?
My fellow citizens, I stand here today humbled by the task before us, grateful for the trust you've bestowed, mindful of the sacrifices borne by our ancestors. I thank President Bush for his service to our nation. As well as the generosity and cooperation he has shown throughout this transition. 44 Americans have now taken the presidential oath. The words have been spoken during rising tides of prosperity and the still waters of peace. Yet, every so often, the oath is taken amidst gathering clouds and raging storms. At these moments, America has carried on not simply because of the skill or vision of those in high office, but because we, the people, have remained faithful to the ideals of our forebears and true to our founding documents. So it has been, so it must be with this generation of Americans. That we are in the midst of crisis is now well understood. Our nation is at war against a far-reaching network of violence and hatred. Our economy is badly weakened, a consequence of greed and irresponsibility on the part of some, but also our collective failure to make hard choices and prepare the nation for a new age. Homes have been lost, jobs shed, businesses shuttered. Our health care is too costly, our schools fail too many, and each day brings further evidence that the ways we use energy strengthen our adversaries and threaten our planet.
For me, what it was, since you and I are roughly the same age, in terms of Obama and the inauguration, was I grew up in a small town, Port Henry, New York, right along Lake Champlain in the Adirondack Mountains, and a nearly predominantly white area.
Sure.
So here we had this black president, the first black president in history, who had all this charisma and energy, and there was just this sort of feel-good vibe from his inauguration, where our high school math teacher stopped the class and put on the inauguration on the little TV. It was just so incredible that here it is, a teacher stopped what they were doing to show us the inauguration as high school students.
Yeah, he could have done it in many other times, but it's like, yeah, this was, I mean, we were discussing in the pre-show that it was very much hyped. And it was one of the few times that at least those that supported him or voted in the election believed the hype. There were skeptical voices, and I was skeptical of them until, 2 years later when the Congress flipped again, partly as a reaction, but also because the Democratic you had, basically as a then, as a teenager, progressive Jon Stewart watcher, I just wanted the Democrats in charge because the narrative was Democrats in charge means better results, or we get the change we want. Obama's inauguration was almost pitched as a return to normalcy for the sensible, for the anti-war, for the those that did not like everything the Bush administration was doing.
Right. I mean, because you had 9/11 and you had the war in Afghanistan, and then you had the war in Iraq about a year and a half later, maybe even a little less, where it was really nothing more than at the end of the day, trying to finish something that George H.W. Bush, the father, started, and George W. was trying to get it finished.
And then Obama was finishing everything that W started, as far as the wars, but also just, we're going to fix immigration, we're going to fix healthcare. And it was done in that bipartisan way, which also meant just, we're going to do what corporations want. We're going to do what our donors want. And it's like, well, this wasn't any change at all. In fact, if anything, you had things like Citizens United, which was a cementation that everything that you didn't like about the Bush era was actually always going to be the case. So it was just kind of like and this is other commentators after the fact now have said like Obama was strip mining hope from our generation. Like it was being extracted as a commodity, which made a lot of people money. Now, to get back to your original question of like, do I have strong memories of 08? No. What I do is I have strong memories of 4 years ago because I actually went to the inauguration to protest it.
Really?
Particularly to protest the system overall, but Trump was just also being inaugurated, so why not? I find it interesting that like you have the Women's March a bit later, and that was much larger, but during the inauguration, it was pretty much us far lefties that were there on the margins outside of the mall, kind of raising hell. But there was also a rally as well, and it was a pretty good energy as far as like a lot of different mixing of opponents to the Trump administration. And yeah, so it was a memorable day for me. It's just as far as it was a lot of fun. My friend got arrested. There was a lot of, there was the Black Bloc rioting around. Then because the police from the get-go were trying to kettle them, arrest them, simply for marching without a permit. Then you respond by breaking things. Mostly you get away, but that's my interpretation. You don't have to take my word for it.
Well, I mean, you were there. I wasn't. I mean,
sure, but I was also like
different.
I kept wide of the chaos, so I wouldn't get kettled. And yes, things I learned from Occupy: how to not get kettled when you're basically trying to express, use the public square, but the police want to like barricade you into a spot, so then you're basically effectively detained for as long as they deem fit, which in the case of those kettled that day was like 12 hours later.
Jeez.
They're not formally processed until 12 hours. And yes, that's without access to the bathroom, food, or whatever.
Oh, jeez. Can't even imagine how rough that is. Dan Plaat, host of the Three Left show and a history minor, as he is here with me, Blaise Bryant, as we're talking about inaugurations, protests, all that sort of really timely stuff that we are dealing with as a country right now. You were part of the Occupy protests, which I think is really cool and fascinating because that was such a long, I don't want to say drawn out protest, but it was very long and really passionate, really, and it's still going on.
It still hasn't been matched. I mean, you have the uprisings that have been occurring in Black neighborhoods, Black cities, and the uprising is the right term, I believe. Occupy was also something of an uprising, but it was also more of a festival. It was almost much of a festival because people would ask, what is your purpose? What is your goal? What is your demand? And it's like, well, our demand is that we continue to exist as the way we're doing this right now, practicing anarchism, doing a government assembly, almost having a parallel society in parks. And I will qualify that I was active with Zuccotti Park in New York City, which was the original. Sorry for the ums.
That's okay.
And it was a kind of radicalization. I have my own radicalization story, but I think what I wanted to impress was that, this year, it seems like the inauguration is kind of actually more of a broadcast. It will be a broadcast event, I assume, a broadcast syndicated pageant, and not like a political rally or a ceremony. Or it's a ceremony in the same way that, like, I guess the Queen's Jubilee is a ceremony.
Right, except for the fact that there's not going to be a national mall that's open for the inauguration or any of that.
Right, it's going to be like the Emmys.
Yeah, that's probably a good way of putting it, actually.
Because my who was it? It was my brother. Maybe it was a family member talking about it, like listing the musical acts. Like, we could have a yearly, national pageant of musical acts showcasing the diversity of American creativity, where we have, I suppose the Grammys are meant to do this, but like, what if we have one that's more nationalistic, something that's put on by the government, or sponsored? But that would be a waste of taxpayer money. It should be private, and thus, I guess the Grammys.
That's an
But then,
interesting thought.
but it's a question of like, it's a binary between something that's nonprofit government managed versus something that's then private but completely commercial.
Yeah, but then how do you? It's a matter of, or do we try and do something where we like highlight up and coming artists who haven't signed a big record label, because we know how much that all dictates into this.
Yeah, and it could be done genre by genre, which the
Right.
Grammys focuses on what's popular instead of what I say creative showcase. I mean, like, we're going to do some dubstep, we're going to do some hybrid stuff. We're going to seek out like a YouTube, the next Bieber or something like that. But
Right.
what I mean is, like, the third option from that binary is things that are an event would be managed by musicians, by the musicians for the musicians. A republic by the people for the people would be actual more democracy, not less. And I think one of those American myths is that we have, when Republicans say like we're a republic, not a democracy, they're absolutely right. Democracy would entail that we have more electoral power, more people participating. For example, other countries in the world, some require being registered as a voter. We do not. This does have effects, like in local elections, you only have 30% participating. How is that different than a merchant republic from the Renaissance, where it's the 30% richest people, those that own property? Now, as far as ownership, I suppose it's more split down half and half, like in our city.
Mm-hmm.
But others, it's 30-70.
Yeah, but then, on that same sort of token, Dan, it's really inexcusable given how much access there is to information.
Right. And that's kind of what drives people nuts, is that the Democrat, a lot of other things have been democratized via the internet, but not governance, not our workplaces. Like, the workplace is the most authoritarian place we have.
Yeah.
And it only gets a little bit better from there, where you have some local governments, state governments that are staffed with technocrats, which their ideology is based on we technical experts know best, and everyone else needs to just conform to our plans of automation, our plans of smart cities, which is all based on automating governance, because like it's based on a very cynical human nature is bad, humans suck, so we should just automate business cycles, automate governance, automate our lives,
right,
or as much as possible, to take it out of human hands. When really what actually works out in the world is actually democratizing and letting more people actually make decisions. The imbalance or the chaos or the confusion occurs when you have some people who are empowered, but many people who aren't. And especially when they're told they're empowered, that they have more power in a marketplace, but they don't have any power in their lives really at all, except over what shampoo they're buying. But even that is then constrained by monopoly or cartels in business.
Think of how more accessible from a pedestrian or transportation, how overall more accessible our cities and towns would be, and the lesser need to be dumping tons and tons and tons of money into infrastructure, because that's been a constant forefront sort of thinking measure this whole time, because, well, the people are involved.
No, I want to bring up, since this is a history show, right, that there's a concept called the imperial presidency. There's a book titled that, I believe, and it kind of chronicles how from World War II onward, when America became a world power and subsumed the place of protecting global trading with our Navy, which we still do, and certain geopolitical analysts, like, in the next 50 years, will we still be able to do that? As soon as you take the American Navy away, does the global economy stop functioning as needed, especially after coronavirus. The consumption patterns of the whole world are basically shifting, like we've reached peak consumption, both in demographics, anyway, I'm getting off track.
Right.
But what I'm talking about is that since the 50s, the president or 40s has been acquiring, either by, not always consciously, more responsibilities, more power. The ability to declare war, to send troops, the fact that the president, whether it be W, can just say, I'm going to authorize troops, and the Congress just has to authorize my use of force. And this is because Congress, when we start taking on more global responsibility, you have local Congress people, right, who don't want that responsibility because, well, it's a lot of pressure, A. B, the constituents don't want them to be responsible, or like they'll be mad because whatever you do, it's usually the wrong thing. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be the global peacekeeper, right?
Right.
It can't be done in a community. That's what the UN was for. So it's kind of like you actually make the UN more powerful, more of an actual global institution, which means people actually vote in elections for UN representatives instead of them just being appointed. We actually make it more of a democratic institution. Again, something that is very unlikely. Same thing as making the EU more democratic, which is its big drawback.
Right.
And the same goes for our own country. It's like, what's wrong with America? We're just not democratic enough, is kind of my broad answer. And that's also how my leftism, socialism, is expressed, in that, like, really what it is just more democracy. And what it comes down to is the people who oppose lefty politics are really just don't like democracy. They just don't want to. It's not about just not sharing wealth or distributing it equitably. It's about power. And you have worldviews, right? It's not just about individuals, power grabbing, but about the beliefs that power can't be trusted beyond a few good moral people, or no one's moral, we're all sinners. So really nobody, we should just have a system to make sure that as few people can even have power. Better to have one corrupt person than 100 corrupt people stiffing each other over.
Right, but it's high time that we as a country, I think, need to start remaking history, because there is so much that needs to be changed. I mean, I look back at what happened on January 6th of this year and can't help but think, if an electoral college didn't exist, would what happened?
No, like I was just covering on my program, plug, the blockchain and its relevance to doing lefty politics. But particularly, even this is, I think this is something any person, regardless of like how you feel about socialism, the evil socialism, can attest that corporations have more leverage than you in the marketplace, right? If you book a ticket on an airline and they cancel your flight, it is on you. You have the responsibility to get a refund. Why not have a contract that if your flight gets canceled, or if your package doesn't get to you, then if A, then B, which is simple coding. So why isn't that kind of contract coded into that user agreement that you check mark? It isn't. And why? Because of centralized power. The corporation has their server, and when you use the internet, you're going through that. So blockchain is networking computers together so that it's a mesh network instead of being spokes into the center of a wheel. So what was that going on? So with blockchain, with this kind of network or contracts, like if the vote total is this, then election is won, right? There doesn't have to be all these other ceremonies, traditions, and the Electoral College itself is like a tradition of slaveholding states having as much power as non-slave owning states.
Right, because that's when it was set up.
Yes,
I'm just being perfectly clear that you're not putting a spin on this, because it was set up that way that time.
It's later on that like people whose interest it is to keep it going would then make other justifications saying like, no, this is about smaller states having as much say as larger states. But there was court cases in the Victorian, meaning late 19th century, that were all about this question of like, is representation about how many people you actually have, or is it about the geography, which includes property and thus the value of the property?
Right.
And it was like does one man equal one vote? And this was like, are senators constitutional? Like this question was fought over vigorously in the 1880s or 90s. And
and even before that, Dan, go back to the 3/5 compromise.
Yes,
In terms
exactly.
of how people were counted.
I'm just trying to bring it even closer, like post-slavery context, so
Sure.
that anyone who's listening will be like, well, that was so long ago. And like, no. It was only like in the 30s that we actually made senators directly electable. Before they were appointed by parties. They're by the party structure. I sometimes want to joke. It's not just a joke. I'm trying to write an essay around the idea that we live in one-party states. People say North Korea is such a nightmare. Well, as far as like, well, really what a one-party communist state is that you do politics through this institution, the party. If you are you could be a minority party, but you're kind of a non-factor. Maybe you can make some amendments here or there. It feels like you're participating, but I've interacted with the state legislature in New York, and I can tell you that there is a oppressive atmosphere when it comes to leadership. Whoever has the leadership is setting everything.
Sure. No doubt about that.
Now, on the national level, it seems more split, but between gerrymandering, money in politics, super PACs, and the kinds of other voter suppression of various types, it seems like that's also being calcified into not like one party is always going to be in charge, but when the party is in charge, it's like a one-party state. And that's why when the president changes, that's why it feels like such an apocalypse, because it's basically saying for 4 years, you will have no empowerment in this country. That's what was told to liberals when Trump was elected. It's what was told to small business owners who own boats. You will have no more empowerment when Biden is in power.
Oh, that's a perfect way. Yeah, we're out of time here. Dan Plaat, he is a political organizer as well as a history minor from the City University of New York. Dan, I can't thank you enough. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. I love this stuff.
That's all the time we have. Thanks for listening to Bllaisin History, blazing through history 1 week at a time. What do you think? Let me know at facebook.com/Bllaisin Shows. That's BLAISIN Shows. On Twitter at Bllaisin Shows. Or email me, blaizinshows@gmail.com. You can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts or on my website, blaizinshows.com. To quote the late Franklin D. Roosevelt, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk again next week. On Bllaisin History, I'm Blaise Bryant.